There are a number of issues with that diet in terms of lack of some nutrients, an overabundance
Mm-hmm.
of some anti-nutrients, so there's too much of some things,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
protein inadequacy. So it's on those three levels really that I started to explore why this might not be doing you any favors if you take that diet on. Anti-nutrients are incredibly ignored as a concept, and a lot of people don't even know
Mm.
they exist. So
Mm.
anti-nutrients are things which are
Mm.
found in plants, like a couple of categories are oxalates and phytates. They're the most common ones. They're found in abundance in some plants, and what they do is they disrupt the body's ability to process other nutrients, and they sometimes they inhibit the absorption of other nutrients such as
Mm.
iron and zinc. So the most important one for me, the one that I came across first, was oxalates. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember first reading about them about the time that Liam Hemsworth got his case of kidney stones from his vegan diet, because my research suggests that the research around that has been greatly skewed and greatly misinterpreted in order to create the narrative that red meat causes cancer and heart disease. And in fact, the first sort of jolt in recent years to that scaremongering belief came from the Annals of Internal Medicine, which produced 5 studies back in 2019, which more or less exonerated red meat.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast with your host, Leigh Brandon. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and a warm review. And now, here is Leigh, the Radical Health Rebel, with this week's podcast.
Welcome to episode 21 of the Radical Health Rebel podcast. This episode is entitled The Great Plant-Based Con with Jayne Buxton, Part 1, and is such a big and important topic that I felt it beneficial for you, the listeners and viewers, to split across 2 episodes. The major question that we will be discussing in this episode is whether a plants-only based diet is truly the best way forward for health that is being pushed by world leaders, even though it's not the diet that they consume themselves. In episode 22 next week, we will share part 2 of the interview, where we discuss whether a plants-only based future is good for the environment and will help to prevent global warming. I highly recommend that if you have any interest in health or the future continuation of the human race, you watch or listen to these episodes, as it will help you be informed so you can make the best choices for your health based on your own personal values, and be aware of what impacts your choices are on the environment and the future of humanity. So do enjoy part 1 of the interview with author Jayne Buxton. Jayne Buxton, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to speaking to you on this really important topic today. So today's episode is entitled The Great Plant-Based Con with Jayne Buxton. Over recent years, following documentaries such as Game Changers and Cowspiracy, it's become established as fact in the consciousness of most of society that a plant-based diet for all will help to improve health and help save the environment. However, there are experts who disagree with this view and believe an omnivorous diet is not only essential for human health, but also for the environment. So which views are true? Now, to help answer those questions, I'm really excited to have Jayne Buxton, author of The Great Plant-Based Con, Why Eating a Plants-Only Diet Won't Improve Your Health or Save the Planet, to help answer those questions. And I have to say, it's one of the best books I have ever read, and I've read a lot of books, especially on nutrition and soil science. Now, whether you're a carnivore, omnivore, vegetarian, vegan, or breatharian, the information that we will be discussing is crucial to your future health, the future of plants and animals across the world, and the future of the planet. Now, I'm sure I can speak for Jayne when I say that we're not here to preach to anyone or to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't do. and that we encourage people to make their own lifestyle choices. But we are here to share solid evidence from which people can make their own decisions in alignment with their own values. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you, Jayne, and really looking forward to looking into where these beliefs and theories came from and how to investigate how accurate they are. So to kick things off, can you share with the audience a little about you, your background, your career to date, and how you became interested in the plant-based phenomenon?
Wow, that's going to take me back a bit, but my background is actually in business. So I spent a long time in management consultancy, working with corporations on their strategies and their go-to-market strategies in particular. And I did that for quite a long time until a topic caught my interest in the late 90s, and I wrote a book about that. That was about the issue of work and parenting and families, which at the time was a very new topic. People weren't talking enough about this whole thing we take for granted now called work-life balance. And so the corporate world looked very different then than it does now. So that gave me a taste of what it was like to write and to dig into to research an issue and then put the discussion together in a way that would appeal to and educate a broader group of people. I then set off on that path of writing, and I wrote fiction as well. I started a couple of non-fiction projects, and then this topic caught my eye about 4 years ago. I had been already interested in it. I had read a couple of books which had really piqued my interest in human health and environmental health, and one of those was Leigh Keith's wonderful book called The Vegetarian Myth. So I was already starting to look at research in a kind of loose way, educating myself. And it was because I had that background of reading that I started to notice that the public debate, was deploying the plant-based advocates rather, were deploying data which I didn't recognize, data which was contrary to that which I had come to understand. So the more I dug, the more I realized just how much misinformation there was around this topic. And I felt compelled to write something. And I was particularly compelled, the sort of tipping point was the Game Changers movie, which you mentioned in your introduction, because I felt that was another step up in the misinformation level. And it was a step up in the appeal to young people in particular and it worked. People were deciding to convert in droves and try veganism on the back of that film. So really that was the start of my research process intensely and putting together a rather long book, I've got to say. So I'm glad you made it through the book. It was rather long.
Yeah. And I read it in about 2 weeks, which is quite quick for me.
Yeah. Pencil in hand. I always have to read with a pencil in hand. My books are all a mess. They're full of marks. Yeah.
Well, as much as I don't like to, I actually, because I was time pressured in terms of when we were first booked in to speak, I actually got a Kindle version just so I had it quicker, just so I had an extra day to read, because I knew I was going to be a bit limited.
Yeah.
But it was just such a fantastic read, and it's clearly so well researched as well, based on the hundreds of books I've read on nutrition, and some as well, on soil science and things like that as well. It was clear to me that it was just extremely well researched and extremely well written, and very easy to read as well.
Thank you.
You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be an expert in nutrition or the environment to understand the book. It's very easy to read.
Well, that was one of my goals, was to write something for lay people. I wasn't really speaking to scientists who speak to themselves all the time, or not, as the case may be. And I wasn't writing for physicians per se, but I'm glad to hear that a lot of physicians have read it and found it useful. I started out as a lay person, and I wanted to write something that would enable other lay people to really understand this issue, because on some levels it is very complicated, and on other levels it's dead simple. So I wanted to try and simplify and get those messages out.
Yeah, I certainly think you achieved that. So I guess the first real question I have for you is, based on the research that you did, would you say a plant-based diet is better for your health?
Short answer, no. I would say no. Do you want me to go into the longer answer?
That was a great
interview.
That was a great interview, Jayne. Yeah, really appreciate your time today. Thanks very much. No, yeah, please go into the long answer.
Yeah. So the long answer, I covered over several chapters, but one of the basic first places to start of why it's not better for us is, I think, on the nutrition front. And I think that a plants-only diet, and I do use that word carefully because plant-based has become kind of adulterated. Nobody knows what plant-based means anymore. Some people, it means, quite a few plants along with all their, their fish and their meat and their eggs. And for other people, it means none of those things. So, and everything in between. So when I say plants only, I mean that's a vegan diet. No, there's no animal source foods. There are a number of issues with that diet in terms of lack of some nutrients, an overabundance of some anti-nutrients. So there's too much of some things, and protein inadequacy. So it's on those three levels really that I started to explore why this might not be doing you any favors if you take that diet on board.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about anti-nutrients?
Yeah. It's interesting that you start with that because anti-nutrients are incredibly ignored as a concept, and a lot of people don't even know they exist. So anti-nutrients are things which are found in plants, like a couple of categories are oxalates and phytates. They're the most common ones. They're found in abundance in some plants, and what they do is they disrupt the body's ability to process other nutrients, and they sometimes they inhibit the absorption of other nutrients such as iron and zinc. So the most important one for me, the one that I came across first was oxalates. And I remember first reading about them about the time that Liam Hemsworth got his case of kidney stones from his vegan diet, because he'd been having spinach smoothies with almond milk every day and really piling on those foods which are high oxalate. So spinach and almonds are two very, very high oxalate foods. And that gave him kidney stones, and he had to stop eating that way. I don't know whether he stopped being vegan, but he had to stop eating that way. And it strikes, and so what are the other symptoms? There is kidney stones, but there's also buildup of these oxalate crystals in your joints. So you can get joint pain, you can get gastro distress. There are a lot of side effects which people maybe aren't aware of. And they may be experiencing those side effects as we speak, but not know that it's the oxalates that are possibly the culprit. And I was just reading another article today, which was quite interesting, which was talking about those foods, and oxalate overload is not a big deal. It's not a big problem so long as you're eating a balanced diet and you're not eating an excess of certain foods. But of course, a vegan diet has an excess of certain foods. So a lot of vegans look to spinach for their iron, right? And then they might look to tofu. Soy products have a lot of oxalates in them. So if we're suggesting a shift to soy proteins, it just stands to reason that we may get a significant uptick in the number of people suffering from oxalate overload. So that's just one example. Then there's, phytic acid is found in things like nuts, grains, seeds. And it is acknowledged that, again, phytates in small quantities are probably going to be okay for most people. Phytates in large quantities will inhibit the absorption of zinc, and that's very dangerous. If you get a zinc deficiency, there are numerous outcomes for that, including mental lethargy and stunting, poor growth, retardation. And again, we're encouraging, in this big push to steer away from animal proteins and move towards plant proteins. We're pushing people towards the nuts, grains, and seeds. I mean, how often do we hear eat more nuts, grains, and seeds? That's where the excess in phytates is going to come from. So it's very dangerous to get our balance of intake so out of whack with a very sort of imbalanced diet that includes too many of these foods.
Yeah, there's something that I might bring up a few more times as we go through, but I don't know if you're familiar with metabolic typing.
Yes, I know that. I know the book, and I mentioned that book. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Now, so I'm a metabolic typing advisor. I've been using metabolic typing to help advise people with their dietary intake since 2004. So that's what, nearly 19 years. And one thing we know is there are certain people, so we're all individual, right? None of us require the same nutrients. And that's why some people can do better on a vegetarian diet, whereas other people can't do a vegetarian diet at all. And one of the things about oxalates is that there are certain types of people who have naturally kind of high levels of oxalates already in their body. And if they eat too many plant-based foods, their oxalate levels goes too high.
Right.
And it isn't just what you mentioned. It actually affects at a cellular level right down to energy production. Now, if you can't produce energy at a cellular level, that affects everything in the human body. So I'm what's called a fast oxidizer. So I have to be really careful to eat a low oxalate diet. Now, from my experience of working with hundreds of people over the last 19 years, probably more than 80% of the people that I've worked with, and I've worked with people of all ethnicities. It's not just because I'm working from London. I would say at least 80% of people I've worked with are fast oxidizers, which means they can't eat a high oxalate diet.
Right? Wow, I'm probably fascinating.
It's probably more than 80% of people that I've worked with. And, it's, again, we'll come back to this, I'm sure, but what I just want to get across is that there's no one diet that fits everybody. We do know people that certainly appear very healthy on a vegetarian diet. But I just want to say this one thing, and then we'll carry on. When I'm working with people, so when I'm teaching someone to work out what food is right for them, what we know from eating food is it affects three things. First of all, our satiety or our appetite. It affects our energy levels and it affects our emotions. Now, when we eat, if 1 to 2 hours after we've eaten, we still feel full, our energy levels are still good, and our emotions still feel good, you kind of know you're eating the right kind of foods. But if you're hungry, you're not feeling good emotionally, you're feeling tired, there was something wrong in what you ate. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, from the hundreds of people I've worked with, so basically what you do is we do it's basically called fine tuning. So what we do is we fine tune the amount of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates that people need to eat from meal to meal, day to day, week to week. Now it can change. It's stuck in stone. I mean, for a woman, it changes throughout the menstrual.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So for females, for instance, through the menstrual cycle, it will change. And most women will tell you they know when they're premenstrual, they generally crave carbs, right? So, but the environment affects what's right for you as well. So in colder weather, you generally go for more broths and stews and more kind of meaty kind of foods. Whereas in the summertime, you might go for more salads, more fruit, for instance. And it's a method of teaching you how to tune into what your body needs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of it is genetic, but it's also environmental. So having worked with so many people, let me ask you this question, Jayne.
Mm-hmm.
How many people, when they've worked through the system, do you think I've ever worked with that felt at their best when they had a plants-only diet?
How many people?
Have a guess.
Ooh, I'm going to say maybe 10%, maybe less, maybe 5% of the people you've worked with. Am I on the right track?
Okay. Now, no. So I'm guessing I don't know exactly how many people I've worked with. I haven't added it up, but let's say it's 800 people.
Mm-hmm.
Not one felt at their best on a plants-only diet.
Not one.
Not one. Now, I've worked with vegetarians, but then they don't eat any animal-based foods, or depends on what kind of vegetarian they are. So vegan, for instance, they won't go near any kind of animal-based foods, and then you've just got to make the best of it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously the other thing we know, and I know you're familiar with the work of Weston A. Price, and obviously he traveled the world and he didn't find any healthy native tribe that didn't eat any kind of animal foods. And again,
Mm-hmm.
they always ate what was local to them. And if they moved away from whatever foods was natural and local to them, then they started to get sick.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they went back to where they were originally from and they ate their native diet, they got well again.
Mm.
Yeah. So if you're from Canada or Siberia, you're not going to do well on even a moderate amount of plant-based foods. You're probably going to get quite ill because that's not how your body has evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. And you wouldn't be able to find that food anyway. So there's another practical problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, that's fascinating. And you obviously know your depth of understanding of that metabolic typing is much, much deeper than mine. I just really touched on that, but it makes complete sense to me. And I guess to most people that we are also completely different, and whether there are, I don't know how many types there are. Is it 10 types? 10 types. There may even be more.
Yeah, actually, you are spot on. There is 10. Yeah. I mean, well, it depends. It depends how you look at it. But there's 6 main types, but then there's another type called variable type. So that's kind of 7. But yeah, that's just getting a bit more technical if we go beyond that. But even within each type, even within each metabolic type, everyone is still different.
Yeah. But and it's very interesting.
You go on. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, it's very interesting that you talk about who does well on a vegetarian or vegan diet, and I did quite a lot of reading on this about what might define it. And even the way we process something like vitamin A is one of the key nutrients that differs. Some people can process that the carotene that comes from the vegetables, the carrots, and convert that into proper vitamin A. Other people can't, or they can't do it very efficiently. So right there, you'll have a big group of people who will be suffering from vitamin A deficiency if they're on a vegan diet. And then there are the enzymes in the stomach that process carbohydrates, which are all very different. So if you're not somebody who can process carbohydrates really well and easily, you're not going to do well on those high carbohydrate protein foods like the beans, which you have to eat in absolute, huge quantities to get your protein. So I think it's fascinating. And, I take my hat off to anyone who is doing well genuinely on a vegetarian or a vegan diet. And if they're really listening to their bodies, and they are, one of the rare cases of individuals who can thrive, great, that's fine. But we shouldn't be recommending it to everybody as a standard across the board, all ages, all life situations kind of diet.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Dr. Roger Williams?
Not very, but yes, I think I covered some of his research as well in connection with this.
So he wrote a book called Biochemical Individuality.
That's right. That's
And
right. Yeah.
So, we all, like you were saying, we all absorb different nutrients in different quantities. For instance, we know that people from colder climates, our digestive tracts are shorter, whereas people that, say, come from somewhere like Central America, where it's lots of forest and there's no big game meats, their intestinal tracts are much longer because they need to be longer to be able to extract the protein from the plants. Whereas if you're eating an animal-based diet, it's much easier to absorb the protein because it's more bioavailable. So someone like me, I would guess, I mean, I've never measured it, but I'd imagine my digestive tract is pretty short because I know I flourish on a very high protein, very high fat, very low carbohydrate diet. Whenever I've moved off of that, I notice I don't feel very good.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right that, we can't all eat the same way and expect for everyone to be healthy. It's just not how nature works.
Yeah. And I might be jumping ahead a little bit here, but this fact is appreciated even by those who recommend a near vegan, near vegetarian diet, such as the Eat Lancet Commission. So their planetary health diet, which is at its most extreme, has no animal foods in it whatsoever. So their lowest level of healthy intake is 0 for those foods. They are pushing the whole concept of getting protein from beans and nuts and seeds, and there's grains, whole grains are everywhere in that diet. And that's supposed to be their view of the healthy diet across the board for everybody. But then they admit in the finer print of their document that it's not good for everybody and that it's not recommended for children or for teenagers or for pregnant women or for the elderly or for the frail. So there's a whole host. I mean, I really don't know. There's a very small group of people that it would be appropriate for. So it's interesting that even in their documentation, there is the admission that not everybody can eat the same diet and that near vegan will not suit most people and will result in deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies.
Yeah, which is why, again, most people that are vegetarian or vegan will supplement because the diet is deficient. They have to supplement if they want to be healthy.
Yeah, and I don't know if most of them do, to be honest. I don't know if most of them do. So they might intend to, they might want to, but do they? Because, research came out, I think it was last year. I felt that was a funny sound in my ear. I wonder if my headphones were going a bit wonky. Last year, there was a research, or 2 years ago, research showing that vegans and vegetarians, vegans in particular, had 2.5 times the rate of hip fractures than omnivores. And I remember a doctor discussing this and saying, well, vegans are pretty clued up now, and they do take supplements to prevent this. Well, if they're so clued up, why are they getting 2.5 times the rate of fractures? So they're obviously not taking the supplements or not eating in a way that is counteracting that. So I think we need to be very careful about, thinking that supplements are in any way a solution to this problem. People forget, people don't know. B, they can't afford them. It's very expensive to supplement your way through life. So it's really a suboptimal strategy for health.
Yeah. So I just want to go back to the beginning. So we spoke about anti-nutrients.
Yeah.
There was two other things you mentioned at the beginning. I can't remember what they were. What were the other two?
Nutrients. So nutrients is the number one. It's a fact that there are certain nutrients that are missing if you're only eating plants. So things like preformed vitamin A, B12, DHA and EPA, which are those essential fatty acids for brain, function and brain development. It's relatively more difficult to get iron and zinc. So there's a whole host of nutrients that you can't get other than by supplementation, and we don't know how effective supplementation is either. So that was that's just a fact, and I find it interesting that is rarely acknowledged by very strident vegan activists. So there was a debate recently between somebody called Ivor Cummins and a vegan doctor called Michael Greger. It was a very short debate held on the news. And Ivor Cummins stated all of the nutrient deficiencies that might arise in a vegan diet. And Dr. Greger, rather than address those, simply switched the subject and brought up a completely irrelevant and deeply flawed study, for instance, to prove that his way of eating was better and would lead to longer lives. So there's that kind of sidestepping of this nutrition issue, which is really a constant tactic by vegan advocates, I find. I don't know if you've had that experience of debating with people who just don't want to see the nutrient deficiencies. They just don't want to admit that they're there. And then I generally
don't get into the. Yeah, I was going to say I generally don't get into debates with people. Certainly, when I'm working with clients, I just say, "Look, the proof is in the pudding." The results will speak for themselves. Yeah. So I don't, and in that situation, I don't need to debate, and I don't have any dogma. And that's what I say to my client. I have no dogma around food because at the end of the day, your body will tell you what your body needs. I'm not here to tell you what your body needs. I'm here to show you how to work it out for yourself.
Yeah, that's good.
And
yeah. So the third thing that I mentioned earlier in terms of the whole health angle is protein. So it is often stated that you can get all the protein you need from plants. And what many people do not realize is that protein is not the same as protein. There are different types of protein, and sort of animal sourced proteins are more complete. They have all of the amino acids that our body needs to synthesize that protein, and they are more bioavailable. And those two facts are indisputable. So it means that, if you wanted your daily quota of protein, you could eat 8 ounces of steak. If you wanted to get that from quinoa, I think you'd have to eat 2 kilos of quinoa. And that wouldn't be complete protein even then, because it's very hard to get all those amino acids to the right amount. So it's very clear that proteins are not equivalent. And we really should stop talking about them as if they are. And I was even distressed by, I heard a lecture by Professor Tim Spector about a couple of weeks ago. And I respect his work enormously. And we have a lot of crossover in our work. In fact, I cite his book several times in mine. Then he said something astonishing to me in his talk, which was, we can get all the protein we need from mushrooms. And I thought, can we? And I went and looked it up. I thought, am I going crazy? I'm sure I know these numbers, and I went back and realized 100 grams of mushrooms will give you 3 grams of protein. Well, 100 grams of steak is going to give you 25 grams of protein. So no, I'm sorry, they're not equivalent, and they're not even qualitatively equivalent. So it's amazing how these lazy kind of throwaway comments come from even the most educated sources, and it's harmful to people. It's really harmful to people who maybe know a little less and who just believe that.
Yeah. So I guess the next question I have for you, because this is a common belief, is that if you eat red meat, you've got an increased risk of heart disease and cancer. What does your research suggest on that?
My research suggests that the research around that has been greatly skewed and greatly misinterpreted in order to create the narrative that red meat causes cancer and heart disease. And in fact, the first sort of jolt in recent years to that scaremongering belief came from the Annals of Internal Medicine, which produced 5 studies back in 2019, which more or less exonerated red meat and even processed meat, did not find enough reason and enough quality research showing harm in order to recommend that we consume less. And that caused a huge uproar. Of course, the plant-based camp didn't want to believe that, and it became much disputed for a good 2 years running after that those studies came out. But then something was published just the other day, a study in, I forget what the journal was, Journal of Preventative Cardiology or Clinical Nutrition. Forgive me, I can't remember. And again, that was a team of researchers who looked at 32 previous meta-analyses and regressive analyses and some RCTs. And again, they concluded that a lot of the research had been exaggerated. So we do have evidence that the evidence against meat is poor, but it's taking a very long time for that to work its way through the biases. I mean, the sort of the super tanker that is the whole fear of red meat and disease theory is very hard to turn around. It's going to take some time. And it is not helped by research such as came out fairly recently, the 2019 Global Burden of Disease report. So GBD report, it comes out every 2 years. It's very influential. It's used to create public policy. It's used for all kinds of things, and it's widely cited. And the 2019 report increased the risk of eating red meat by 36-fold over the 2017 report, which that in itself was an extraordinary jump. And of course, some scientists caught on to this, including Alice Stanton, Frederick Leroy, Chris Elliott, a couple of others here in the UK. And they filed a complaint and a challenge. And although their paper was not published, their challenge, it was admitted that there were some errors in those calculations, that they were not evidence-based, and that it was not right to portray red meat consumption in that light. And I think the GBD report itself concluded that people should eat no red meat at all for their health, none. And then they admitted that was incorrect. That's not right. And they agreed to correct that going forward. Now, the interesting thing is even the World Cancer Research Fund found the GBD conclusion to be incorrect. So the Cancer Research Fund, who should be most concerned about the impact that any food has on cancer, they themselves said that the risk of eating red meat had been grossly overstated, and that the risk was people would give up eating red meat and miss out on all the nutrients as a consequence. So I think that's a pretty damning episode, really. And although the Lancet that publishes the GBD report, they've agreed to correct the error next time, the problem is the horse has already bolted. That report has been cited 800 times at least. I noticed that it was being used as the basis of a consumer-facing longevity calculator. So you could plug your diet in and get a recommendation for how to change it to live longer. And the recommendation on red meat in that calculator comes from the Global Burden of Disease report. So it's already feeding through in the commercial world and consumer-facing applications, and that's why it's terrifying. That's why it's so impactful when bad research gets out there and influences our decisions.
Yeah, I just want to quickly just go back. You said RCT earlier. I just want to because there'll be some people not knowing what RCT means. It means randomized controlled trial.
Controlled trials.
Just in case people are like, what does RCT mean?
So the
other thing you talk about a lot in your book is.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Carry on.
No, I was going to say the opposite.
No, I was going to say
is not an RCT, but a epidemiological study, which is an observational study. And most of the research which condemns red meat or any meat is epidemiological, and that has a bunch of flaws, which we can go into if you think your audience would find that interesting. It cannot be used to determine a causal relationship.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is there's quite a few things to look at there. You know, if you're just well, first of all, you're asking someone to tell you what they've eaten. Now, most people don't tell the truth when they tell you what they've eaten. But also, that's discounting what they eat with it. So if you're eating beef, but you're eating McDonald's with bread and French fries that have been fried in vegetable oils, well, who's to say that it's the red meat causing the problem? Could it not be the bread? Could it not be the French fries cooked in these horrendous oils that are known to cause those problems?
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there anything else more than that as to why they're not great ways of looking at that situation?
So there is that problem of determining which of the factors is actually causing the problem. So we call that confounding factors. And there's another big confounding factor, which is called the healthy person confounder, which is when you ask a bunch of people what they've eaten, because we've been told for so long that eating meat's bad, you're going to have more likely to have healthy people who are conscious about improving their own health, who don't eat much or any red meat. So they will have a whole bunch of other healthy habits. They'll probably exercise more. They're probably not overweight. They probably don't smoke or drink to excess. So all of those things will be confounding the results. In other words, it could be they could be healthier and living longer because of all of those factors, nothing to do with the meat that they're eating at all. So that is one factor. The other thing which we need to understand about these epidemiological studies is that they usually report a result in terms of relative risk. You are 1.2 times, you're 20% more likely to die of some disease if you eat red meat than if you don't, for example. We need to think about what that really, really means, that sort of that 20%, which is a relative risk calculation. It's incredibly small. In absolute terms, it's a very small jump in your risk. So for colon cancer, for instance, it was deemed to be about an 18 to 20% increase in risk if you ate processed meat. Well, what it did is it rose 5.6 people might get colon cancer ordinarily. If they were eating bacon every single day, 6.6 people might get it. Now, that jump from 5.6 to 6.6 is not very big. And a lot of people looking at that, if they really understood it, would say, well, actually, that doesn't seem very big. I don't even know if it's a causal relationship because we can't establish causation here because of all these other factors. So they might decide to ignore that risk in that study. And in fact, I think they probably should. So, the range of difficulties associated with those studies, the risk factors of 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, they do not meet what's called the Bradford Hill criteria for causality. So it's a minimum of 2 times the risk that you need in order to even begin talking about a causal relationship. And this is ignored day in, day out because epidemiology, nutritional epidemiology, has become an industry. It's just become something that people do and they get funding to do it and they need to produce results and they produce these results, which are really not worth the paper they're written on.
Yeah, it's the same trick that's played by the pharmaceutical industry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they did the same with statins. They did the same with the COVID vaccines.
Absolutely.
With
relative risk.
With statins. Yeah. So doctors are told if you give someone a statin, they're 50% less likely to have a heart attack. Well, that's the relative risk. What's the actual or the absolute risk? It's 1%. Right. And then we know from the COVID vaccines, everyone was told they were 90 to 95% effective. That was the relative risk. Yes. The absolute risk was 0.8 to 1.5%.
Mm-hmm.
So if it had been said on the news every single day for throughout 2021 that if you take this injection, you're going to reduce your risk by about 1%, rather than the 95% that everyone's being told, we know what would have happened.
Yeah. So they were never going to say that.
We are aware of these. No. So we are aware of these, dirty tricks that get played.
Yeah.
On us.
Absolutely.
Another question I've got for you. I know several people myself who they know eating vegetarian isn't the healthiest option for them. They know that, but they still eat vegetarian. And the reason they do that is because they don't want to be cruel to animals. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about your views on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for people who will listen to the nutritional arguments and they'll say, I know it's not nutritionally a very sound diet, but I want to do it because I do not want to eat animals and I don't want to partake of that level of cruelty. Absolutely fair enough. Absolutely fair enough. People who make that decision should be able to make that decision, and I understand it. Myself and others in my position, I look at the issue of animal welfare in a different way. So the first thing to realize, and that I realized, and it took me a long time to realize this, is that there is animal death and animal cruelty as part of all farming, whether it be plants or animal foods that are being farmed. So, one of the most affecting stories that was told that I came across during my research was talking to a Californian farmer who said every harvest for his avocados and fruit trees, he has to kill 40,000 gophers. It's just a fact. And he said this happens on every farm. Farmers don't like to talk about it. So we're killing gophers, mice, rabbits, deer, bees by the billion, birds as a consequence of the use of fertilizer and clearing land and habitats. So the list of deaths associated with plant-based diets is phenomenally long. And in fact, there was a very interesting study done in 2003 by somebody called Steve Davis. I'm sure you're familiar with it, who said he concluded that on balance, a concern about least harm, doing the least harm to the animal world possible, was best served by an omnivore diet, and that a vegan diet ended up killing more creatures. So that's his, and he's not the only one to have made that calculation. So that's one really important factor. The other factor for me is I think we should be expanding our concept of welfare. Welfare needs to include human welfare as well. And human welfare is often served better by including animal source foods in the diet, especially if you're broadening your perspective from our Western centric, developed country centric perspective to one that takes in the whole world. In developing nations, they need animal source foods, and their welfare is served by that. So you're constantly balancing out, why do we have the right to deprive people who have anemia? 2 billion people in the world suffer from anemia. Do we have the right to tell them not to eat the foods which could help fix that problem and give them some B12 and some iron in a bioavailable form. Do you have the right to say to a child in a very poor country or a poor family in a developing country that they need vitamin A? Well, they can eat 12 carrots to get their daily vitamin A, or they can eat 1 egg. So this is where animal source foods are a high welfare choice when you're talking about human health and welfare. And I don't think we should ever talk about animal welfare separated from human welfare. I just think we're all creatures on the earth, and we need to be finding a way to live and to eat in a way that sustains us healthily, and do the minimal, within that context, do the minimal harm to the animals. So I do believe we have a long way to go to increase welfare in our factory farming systems. We need to get rid of factory farming systems. We need to be overturning all of those practices. And so I don't disagree at all with vegans on that front. I don't disagree one bit.
Thanks for watching the Radical Health Rebel YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to share with your friends and family, or share via your social media. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to receive notifications of new video clips from the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode, completely ad-free, plus premium content, and join the Radical Health Rebel Patreon community, head on over to the Radical Health Rebel Patreon channel at www.patreon.com/Radical Health Rebel. Thanks again for watching.